Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to share with you my face palette collection. So I'm going to be sharing all my face palettes, anything that has bronzers, highlighters, blushes, contours, anything that has powder you put on your face, I will be sharing in today's video. I'll let you know my favorites, my least favorites, and which ones I would recommend for certain reasons. So if you guys are interested in seeing my face palette collection, then just keep on watching. Alright, so right now I do keep all of my face palettes in one drawer. I am going to be changing that up and just minimizing a bit in the next couple weeks, but this is where everything is for now, all in one Alex drawer, and it is pretty much overflowing. So, and clearly these are not as organized as my eyeshadow palettes. They are just all thrown in there really randomly. So I'm just gonna go through them one by one and let you guys know how I feel about each palette really quickly. I'm gonna just start off with the palettes that are on top. So we have the Too Faced Sweet Peach Glow palette. I got this the day it was released at midnight, about a year and a half ago. It's a highlighter, bronzer, and blush palette from Too Faced, and I have not used this as much as I want to. That's about all I have to say about it. I like it. I like the shades, but I just have so many other palettes in my collection that I like a lot better, so there's nothing really wrong with it. There's just so much more in my collection that I like better, and I'll talk about those in a bit. Then we have, let's go into this highlighting trio. I actually just got this sent to me from Kevyn Aucoin maybe about 2 weeks ago. Alright, so those are the swatches, and they actually swatch really pretty. I haven't swatched them, but I've tried to use them for a brow bone highlight, a highlight on my cheek, and like an inner corner highlight. And I didn't like how they applied because there was just so much fallout, and it didn't like stick to my eye look, and it just looked like very textured on my face, and it didn't really pick up a lot of pigment. So next I have the Tarte Park Avenue Princess palette, and it's gorgeous packaging, but it's actually so heavy, and I didn't really think about that when I first got it, but a couple times that I've traveled in the past few months, like I can't bring this palette because it weighs my baggage down. It's a very heavy palette compared to like basically any other palette in my collection. It's not incredibly heavy, but it's just heavier than other palettes, so that's something to keep in mind. But the shades in here I really like. I find both of these pretty similar for contouring. I use this one a little bit for bronzer, but I mainly use these two and then these lighter shades. So I use these two the most out of everything in the palette for contouring. I do have a review on it, and you get a ton of products. So my biggest complaint with this palette is just that I can't travel with it because it is heavier than some other palettes if I want to pack light. And then this is my favorite, I think, highlighter palette in my collection. This is the newer ColourPop highlighter palette, the Innuendo palette. I love this. It's super pretty because it has a pretty nice variety. A lot of people were comparing it to the Anastasia Nicole collab from last year. I actually did have that palette, and I gave it to my cousin. I gave her like 7 or 8 different palettes all at the same time, just because I found that there was a lot more fallout with that palette compared to this. I find the shades to be very similar, but I really prefer this formula just because there's less fallout and less texture, or like the appearance of texture with the highlighters on my face. So I really love these. This one, Fine Lines and On Tempo, these are my 2 favorites. These are so pretty because I really like bronzy tones and like rose gold icy highlighters. Those are my favorite, and I really like there's nothing in here that's like super yellow or gold. So I just love this palette so much. Highly recommend it. It's under $20. So next, this is super well loved. This is the Cheekathon palette from Benefit. I've used this palette so much. I got it 2 years ago when it first came out, and they come out with blush palettes like this. They actually, the day you guys are watching this video, just came out with a new one. So I will link that in my description box. That it's very similar to this. I highly recommend these. I think it's a really great value. I've always found, because I've had a couple different blush palettes from Benefit, that the blush palettes are a very consistent quality to their single blushes. Like I don't see that the formula is any different. So I do really recommend those, and I just love all the shades. Rockachore and Dallas are like my all-time favorite blushes. So next we have the Jaclyn Hill Becca palette collab from 2 years ago. I loved this palette so much. I would wear it every day for about a year straight. I used basically all the shades in here on my wedding day. I barely use it now just because I'm into other shades and I like other tones better on my face right now, but I still really like this palette. And then this Tarte Wipeout palette. This is a cream contour and color correcting palette. I think they just discontinued this like in the past couple months. I don't know if I should still keep this in my collection because I've had it for about 2 years now. I don't know if it's like kind of gross that I still have it because it's cream product, but I usually just go in there with some kind of brush, and I really actually do like the formula of this palette. So I might keep it for maybe a few months and then end up getting rid of it because it is a cream palette and I probably shouldn't keep it much longer. And then moving into my Smashbox highlighter palettes, this was the collab with Casey Holmes, the gold and the pearl highlighter sets. So these are the two palettes, and I actually prefer the lighter one, the pearl one, just because the gold one is just a little too bronzy for me, and the shades don't really work as nicely on my skin as the pearl one. I actually do like this formula. It's very light. It's more of a natural highlight. You can build it up, but it's not going to be super blinding. I don't know if I'll end up keeping these just because there are people I know who might enjoy that, like friends I know that might enjoy those too and get more use out of them, but I actually do like them. And then I have this Charlotte Tilbury Duo. This is the Film Star Bronze and Glow. I love this. The bronzer in here is super gorgeous. I just love the shade. It is a little bit more neutral, so I use it just on its own to contour. It doesn't look too orange or reddish. Really like it. The highlighter I use for like the center of my face, it's not like a really intense highlighter or anything, or like for my brow bone. I highly recommend this if you guys have been interested in it. I got it for Christmas last year, and it is definitely way more high-end than a lot of my different products, but that is like more luxury product that I do actually really enjoy, and I'm happy that I have. Then I have the other Becca Jaclyn Hill collab, the first one they came out with. I want to say in like fall 2015, so it's been a while. This one I did get a lot of use out of. The Champagne Pop in here is pretty used up. The Blush Copper, I think it's called, and Pearl I haven't used as much, but Champagne Pop in here I've almost hit pan on, so I might just keep this until I hit pan, or just actually use this whole palette up. So I really did enjoy that, but I don't use it much anymore. Next I have this Camouflage palette from Pop Beauty. It's a color correcting palette. I did like this shade, but none of the other shades I really needed to use or really worked for my skin tone. So I don't know if I'll end up keeping this in my collection. I might end up decluttering it pretty soon because I can't really use the rest of the shades. And then let's get into this Anastasia Glow Kit. This was a limited edition one. This is the Sweets Glow Kit, and I've actually been wearing this a lot recently because I've been wearing it in my Anastasia makeup looks with the Soft Glam palette. There's a couple shades in here that are also in the newest Glow Kit from Anastasia. This is super messy because I just used it like yesterday, but these two shades, Marshmallow and Butterscotch, are in the newest Glow Kit. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a very similar color scheme. So I really do still like this. It's definitely a more intense highlighter than I have in some of my other palettes, and it has a little bit more glitter than some of my other highlighters, but I still really like this, especially Butterscotch. That's probably my favorite shade. I don't know if I'll buy other Glow Kits in the future because it's not my like holy grail formula. It's not my absolute favorite, but I really enjoy that one. All right, so I'm gonna move these out of the way so I don't get all the palettes mixed up or drop any. Let's move into some of my e.l.f. palettes. All right, so here are two of my e.l.f. contour duos. This one in St. Lucia is one of my favorite drugstore products of all time. I want to say this is $6. Has a bronzer and blush, and I love this so much. Last year I used this every single day for like 6 months straight. I absolutely love it. In St. Lucia, that's my favorite shade. And then this one is Turks and Caicos. This is like a highlighter, or like a, I'm actually not sure how to use this shade on my skin tone, but then you have a bronzer too. But both of these are shimmery, so I don't really use this one because it's a lot of shimmer. So I definitely recommend St. Lucia because it's a little bit more satin. Then I actually really like this e.l.f. Total Face Palette. It's very light. It's a very natural face palette, but the quality is really great. It shows up very subtle on my complexion, so if you have a lighter complexion than I do, this would be something that pops a little bit more. Like the bronzer is pretty fair on me. The blushes basically blend into my skin, but I actually really enjoy the formula of this palette. If you guys are interested in it, it's definitely a really great value. All right, so these are all of my e.l.f. 4-pan palettes. I didn't even realize how many I had, and just looking at them, there's a couple that I know I'm gonna declutter pretty soon. I have some of the blush palettes. I think I have like, I know I have two of the same one. and I have a couple of them, and they are a really pretty formula, but there's just so many blushes that I wear a lot more, and basically like the shades are very bold to me, so I'm going to be getting rid of these pretty soon, but I do like the formula. I just don't really like those shades. Next we have a bronzer palette, and I've barely used this. I've used this shade, but I haven't gotten to use this one enough, so I definitely need to incorporate it in an everyday makeup drawer in the future just to use it more, because it just kind of gets lost in the pile of these e.l.f. palettes. Then these are also blush palettes, the same ones. And then I have a contour palette, and this one I've barely used also. I might end up decluttering this because this is actually, there's a couple different shades in the contour palette, and this is the shade Light, and it is pretty light. Like some of the highlighter shades are pretty light on me. I'm gonna need to play with this more and just use it more just like the bronzer palette, because I haven't used it enough. And then this palette is a mess because it's very powdery, and I use it actually a lot. This is the Illuminating palette from e.l.f. I really like this palette. The highlighters in here are gorgeous. They're more of like that soft, like glow from within kind of highlighter look. It's definitely not glittery or a lot of texture, but it's a really pretty formula. I really like the shades in this palette. I definitely recommend this. This is definitely my favorite face palette from e.l.f. other than the Contour Duo in St. Lucia. Alright, so next we have these Jouer blush duos that are a little newer in my collection, but this one in Adore, I mentioned it in my favorites. I love this one so much. I wear it all the time. The other two I don't wear as much. I really like the plummy tones in this one. I don't really wear this one at all basically, but this bottom one I wear almost every day for the past month. I really enjoy this blush duo. I really like the formula of these. I do have a review and swatches of all of them. I will link it below. So next I have the Contour Diaries by Pure Cosmetics. I actually haven't used this as much as I want to. I've been thinking about putting it in my everyday makeup drawer recently. So here are all the shades. I was using this a lot last summer, but I haven't really used it since then, and I know Secret was like my favorite in this palette for contouring, so I definitely need to incorporate it in an everyday makeup drawer probably next month, or just add it in for this month so I can start using it a bit more because it's been a while. And then I have another palette from Pure Cosmetics. This is the Vanity palette, and I think I'm on the Pure website. I might not be anymore, but I was for a really long time demoing this palette. It's a face palette, and there's a blush and a bronzer shade that I really like in here. I haven't used this palette in a while, but I really do like this face palette, especially the bronzer. It's really pretty, and then the eyeshadows actually work really nicely too. Some of the shades in here are just like more for everyday, like very minimal makeup looks to me, so I don't really use it as much. But when I was doing more simple, like everyday, like 10-minute makeup, I would use that palette a lot. So that is what I like to use it for, just more minimal makeup looks. Then I have the Anastasia Contour Kit. I actually still reach for this all the time. I've had it for years. I honestly reach for it maybe like once a week, especially this center shade in Fawn. This is my favorite contour shade. This is like one of my all-time favorite contour shades ever, and I've used a lot of it up. So I'm going to keep this until I use basically the whole palette up. I've used a couple of the highlighters quite a bit. I still really like it. I think it's a great formula. I really like the shades in here. So it's still a staple. It's the first face palette I ever owned, and it's still something that's going strong after a couple years. Next, we have the Tarte Pro Glow face palette. This is actually one of my favorite highlighter palettes, probably this one and the ColourPop palette that I mentioned. I don't think I've used this very much in the past several months, but I actually really used this palette up, especially last year. The shade Lit is the one that I use the most. I don't really like the bronzer shades in here. The cream bronzer is just covered in highlighter. It's hard for me to keep that clean. And Sculpt just pulls a little red on my skin tone, so I don't really use those. But the highlighters in here, I really love the highlighters in here so much. So really still enjoy that palette. I haven't used it in a while, but it's definitely like still a really great formula. I love the shade. So this is a Tarte Park Avenue Princess palette that was limited edition maybe 2 years ago. I don't really use this palette anymore. I'll probably end up decluttering it this spring just because it takes up a lot of room in my collection. I have very similar shades elsewhere. This is the Park Avenue Princess bronzer. Really do like that bronzer, but there's nothing too special about that palette for me anymore. Then I have this Naked Cosmetics palette that was in my last BoxyCharm. I actually really like the shades. They're super holographic, so they're not my favorite shades to wear like on a daily basis, but I've been wearing this purple shade and this pink shade a lot in the past couple weeks. Not really these, those aren't really my vibe. Maybe the blue one would look pretty, but mostly the pink and the purple I've been using a bit. It's more of like that kind of fun highlighter look just when you're feeling like purple highlighter. So it's definitely not going to be my go-to palette, but I think it's just fun to have some holographic highlighters. I don't have very many in my collection, so it's just fun to add like a little bit of a pop of color. Alright, so next we have the most expensive palette in my collection, which is the Hourglass Face palette. That was the holiday palette. It's definitely a really pretty palette, and that's why I don't use it, because it's hard for me to just use it because it's really pretty, honestly, and because it costs so much money. So I am actually just opening this for the first time in like a month and a half, and it makes me want to start using it again. I just wanted to kind of not break the look of this like pretty new palette, but just opening it now makes me want to use it more. So that's how I feel about it. I haven't actually used it enough, which is kind of sad because I did get it almost 4 or 5 months ago. So I just need to start using this. And I actually don't like the blushes as much as I thought I would. Like this pink one I will never wear, and then this purple one actually shows up very plum on my skin tone. I thought it would be a little bit more like rosy berry, so that makes me a little bit upset because I was hoping that I would wear the blushes a lot. And then really the only other exciting product in here is the bronzer, and then the face powders are just fine, but they're not something that like I'm jumping for joy over. Really the bronzer and the blushes is what I was excited for, and the blushes aren't my favorite. So that's kind of how I feel about it. There's nothing wrong with the palette. It was just super expensive and I don't love all of it, but just looking at it now makes me want to start using it again for sure. The next I have this face palette from Too Cool for School. This is a brand that is available at Sephora. They make a lot of skincare products, and then this is one of their few makeup products. The bronzer is actually really pretty in here. The highlighter and blush I don't really like at all, so I'll probably end up decluttering this palette just because it takes up a lot of room and I never reach for it. This is the Wet n Wild highlighter palette. I'm wearing this in the intro of this video. It's alright for $15, but honestly, like, I would rather spend $2-3 more and you get such a, to me, better formula with the ColourPop palettes. I find the texture of this a bit too chunky, but I do like this shade, and I don't really wear the blue or the green, but I wear this shade and this shade a bit. So I do like it, but for almost the same price, I definitely prefer ColourPop. So next, this is a Real Her face palette, blush palette that I got in a BoxyCharm a few months ago. I definitely don't want to keep this. I used it a couple times and then I just kind of got over it. I wasn't really into these shades, and I wore this shade a little bit, but I'm not a huge fan of the formula and 2 out of the 3 shades, so I'm not going to keep this around for very long. And then I have my Mary Luminizer palette from The Balm that has the 3 highlighter shades. So Mary Luminizer is definitely my favorite from this palette. Cindy Luminizer and Betty Lou I don't really wear as much, so I might end up decluttering this as well, just because I really just wear one shade and I actually have Mary Luminizer in a single anyways. Alright, so I'm pretty sure this was actually my first face palette and not the Anastasia palette. I want to say this was my first face palette that has like everything in it, and I loved this palette to death for a very long time. It kind of got me pretty far in my makeup journey when I was first starting out, especially this highlighter shade. This was like my first like love of highlighter. This blush, the bronzer, they are all pretty used up. The eyeshadows not so much. I actually did wear the eyeshadows quite a bit, but this is a palette that I'm kind of grown out of, but when I got it, I absolutely loved it. I'm not sure if it's still available, but I just loved it when I first got it. And then this is the Pure Bronze and Brighten palette. This is actually permanent now, and I got this in a BoxyCharm a few months ago. This is a super pigmented palette. This highlighter shade is so pretty and super pigmented. This bronzer I'm not going to use as a bronzer ever. Like, it's an eyeshadow color. So, and then this blush, I really don't like this shade. But the other two shades, like this is a gorgeous eyeshadow and so is this. So I think I want to actually play with this more as an eyeshadow palette just because it's so pigmented and so intense. And the highlighter I actually really like, but it's just a little intense for me for my face. So I just need to use that in a couple different ways. Alright, so lastly I have my Kevyn Aucoin palettes. And this one is obviously well loved. I have it on my vanity basically every single day. So it just gets covered in lash glue and eyeliner. So it looks really gross, and the inside looks gross too because I use it so much. These are cream products, so the powder just transfers to the cream. Let me know if you guys like find a way to keep your palettes really clean, especially when it's like this where it's powder and cream all together, because mine just end up a hot mess. But this sculpting powder, this is my favorite contour shade other than the Anastasia shade, I would say. This, and then I actually have another palette too to show you guys, but this is one of my absolute favorites. There's a significant dent in here. I actually really like this Candlelight powder for like a brow bone highlighter, a really subtle highlighter. So I basically just use this palette for the sculpting powder. The sculpting cream I would use so much for a while, but now it has like brush hairs and it just is really disgusting. So I haven't used it recently. I need to clean it up because it's actually a really beautiful contour shade, but this is like actually how my palettes always look. So I just want to show you guys that. But I do love this palette specifically for the contour powder right now. But I also do love the sculpting cream and the highlighter too. But the sculpting powder is what I use at least a couple times a week. And then I actually forgot that I have this in my collection. I'm actually excited to find it like buried in the back of this drawer. So this was a little book from Kevyn Aucoin that has contour, blush, and eyeshadow. This contour is something I need to start using. So it has a sculpting powder, a highlighter, and a bronzer. And just looking at this now, I haven't touched this in a really long time, and I think this is such an ideal palette for sure. I hate that it comes with everything all together and you can't just buy these separate. But this trio I think is so ideal. I need to start using that more. I totally forgot about that, honestly. Then the eyeshadows, I think I used like maybe twice because I totally forgot I had this palette. So this is what the eyeshadows look like. They have a lot of cool tones in there, and I definitely need to play with that more. And then here is the blush. Neither of the blush shades are really up my alley, but then the eyeshadow shades are ones you could combine with the other eyeshadow color. So overall, it's like a really nice like face palette. There's lots of layers to it, and I really like that you can take them apart because that contour palette, this is what I need to start traveling with, and it looks like a passport. So that's probably perfect for traveling. So I definitely need to start using that more because it was just like way back there for the past couple months and I totally forgot about it. So I almost forgot to show you guys the two palettes that are in my everyday makeup drawer right now. This is the contour palette from Smashbox. I'm liking it again. I've just been using it for the past week since I put it in my drawer. I like to mix together the bronzer and the contour shade because this shade is super, super gray on me. But I've actually been really liking it. I've been using it for a solid week now. And then this is my all-time favorite face palette. And I'm definitely going to repurchase it again in the future. I've talked about it a million times. The Lorac contour kit in mine has been absolutely destroyed because I stepped on it. I told you guys in my everyday makeup drawer video. But the light contour shade in here is my absolute favorite contour shade. I've been just going in and using it. This actually looks awful. Like it looks like I just took it out of the trash can, but that's how much I love this face palette and how committed I am to using it. So that's just the reality of my favorite palette right now. It just looks awful. I guess that is everything for my face palette collection. Definitely let me know what your favorite face palettes are in the comments below. And if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll talk to you guys soon in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.